I'd like to see towns without Foodbank.
Is that okay? Is that good?
And I don't think there's a silver bullet solution.
We can be part of the solution.
We need to do better. It's about choices that you make. Could we have that memo before you announce it? I think there should always be a safety net. We should always be able to support people in their time of need and challenge. That kind of sustained use isn't where we want to be as a society. I don't think we can eradicate the need for support. We just need to be able to get people into a better place.
Welcome to the Hublife Podcast, and joining me and Steph today is Jane James, and all of our guests so far have had little intros that are like 10 seconds long. Yours is really quite long, and so...
You just do too much.
Sorry.
And I said earlier to our audio lady, the best way to describe you is lots of fingers in lots of pies, lady. But she said lots of hats and roles is better, nicer version.
I prefer that one, yeah. I prefer hats.
But yeah, so a local girl grew up in Thetford, went to Musker apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure we can talk anymore. Now runs a local bookshop, involved in the community deeply, so much more than I even knew before, whether that's in Town Council, Brecon Council, Norfolk County Council, or Mayor of Thetford. Add that to the list. An accidental internet star with over 250,000 YouTube views in the last few months, which obviously you really enjoyed, but involved in apparently the Scouts, chair of governors on 2 schools, is that right?
I was, yeah.
Treasurer of Breckland's Talking newspaper, and what I know you from as well is a treasurer of Thetford Municipal United Charities. But yeah, quite a long list of stuff. I think we've run out of time now.
Do you sleep, Jane?
Have I missed anything major that I've forgotten?
No, I just don't do housework.
No housework. Well, that's the intro done. And so what I want to do is jump straight in and frame the conversation for people at home, and then we can crack straight on. So you may be aware, and you probably are aware, Trussell's vision when we joined back in 2011 was that there should be a food bank in every town. And a few years back, they brought a new sort of revised vision of a UK without the need for food banks, which feels like a very different vision, with the backdrop that actually the annual figures came out a couple of weeks ago from Trussell Trust. I don't know if you've seen them, but it was they've gone up to 2.9 million food parcels went out in last year, and so like heading in the wrong direction, if you will. But to start off with, just want to get your general thoughts of that vision, either the original vision of a food bank in every town or the new vision of a UK without the need for food banks. What's your general thoughts around the topic before we go into specifics?
For me, I'd like to see towns without food banks. It feels kind of wrong that we need to rely on those. We absolutely should have those safety nets for people when they have that moment of crisis or just need a helping hand, because sometimes life does just happen. So I don't think we'll ever eradicate them completely. But as you said, with the increase in numbers, that's kind of worrying. But the thing that really stuck with me from the presentation that you gave at the volunteer evening was that notion of heading out to sea, and that we're going to have to go out a bit further, and it's going to take us a while to turn round and take some time coming back again. But I think that's where we are. We're on that turn round. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are at the point where they're like, actually, to have that kind of sustained use isn't where we want to be as a society. Mm-hmm. We need to do better, but we've got to work with everybody. And I think that's the exciting part, is working collectively as a community, whether it be the community or even, local authorities and people like you guys, is working together to support and put other things in as well, because it's never just the use of a food bank. Yeah. It's not that one thing. There's a myriad of support that is needed behind, and I think we need to look at the interventions rather than the solutions more.
Yeah, there is a myriad of support because there's a myriad of issues, isn't there, going on? It's not just food insecurity. That's just like one of the symptoms of the underlying poverty, if you like. But so the solutions, like this is the whole point of the podcast, is to talk about all the different nuances and jigsaw pieces of the puzzle of trying to solve this problem. Like I said, we're still heading out to sea. The numbers are still going up. And so it feels like we're failing in what we're attempting to do. But I think Trussell are really clear, even though it was a 5-year target of trying to make this happen. Even in their own literature of their vision, they're saying it probably won't happen in 5 years, but that's the stake we're putting in the ground, is to try and turn things around and head in the right direction. the solutions then, where do you see the weight of that coming from your point of view in all the things you do and your experiences in life? Do you think that's more central government policy decisions that carry more weight? Is it the charity sector providing more services and helps that aren't essential helps that just help bolster families? Is it communities and working together better than they do already? Or is it individuals taking agency over their own life and responsibility? Which of them has the greater weight in your...
I don't think any of them have greater weight, and I don't think there's a silver bullet solution to it all. It's going to be a combination of everything. Because as you said earlier, it's so nuanced, the individual needs that get to a point and the background to them, that actually we almost need to be all things to all people and offer that myriad of support. And that's where, things like the programme with Breckland Council, bringing in debt advisors, supporting the work of the CAB, the Citizen Advice Bureau, is really important because, again, it's no one thing. And it's almost... it's an awful analogy, but almost like a sweet shop where you've got to pick and mix of different things to pull on depending on the individual needs.
Yeah, and that's what we've tried to do at Foodbank, isn't it? Is to not just be a food provision service. And to be honest, Trussell's model right from the outset was to be more than food. It was more wraparound support, referrals to different things to try and, deal with the drivers of the Foodbank use in the initial stages. And we'll be honest, as a Foodbank, we weren't very good at that initially, just because of capacity as a voluntary organisation. But more and more over the years, we've been trying to put more and more things in place, and we're going to do more and more to have more support, depending on what the problem is that they're coming into the Foodbank with, is that we can be part of the solution, not just the sticking plaster with the food provision. I think the more agencies who can offer more of them helps, the better. And as we were talking about before we started, them agencies having joined up thinking and working together with people, and it's happening more and more, I think, over the last few months and years. So I don't know, what was your response to the government's sort of release of the news of these one-off cost of living payments then? Was that a welcome news for you? Some could argue that it's more of a sticking plaster in the short term. And is that okay? Is that good? Or is it a bit of a cop-out instead of perhaps what Trussell would like to do, which is to raise universal credit across the board? I don't know what your thoughts are of them two things. It's only one part, I believe, of the jigsaw of what needs to happen. But what are your views on universal credit uplift as one of the solutions of that?
I do wonder if it is just too simple a solution. It isn't just about money. But let's face it, if you can turn around and say that if I had all the money in the world and I threw it at it, would that resolve the issue? And you go, yes, well, then it is just a money issue. But quite often it isn't. And we need to support those underlying factors as well. If you accept that it's kind of a temporary situation, then the temporary payment is the right option. But I suppose it's the whole thing, isn't it, of being able to forecast the future. And when we were sitting here 18 months ago, did we ever think that Russia was going to invade Ukraine, and all of a sudden all of those impacts, not just the fuel side of things, but
food inflation is like 17%, isn't it, compared to normal inflation of 10%?
Absolutely, and that's really, really difficult at a time when a lot of people were already going, well, we've just come out of COVID. Things are things are a little bit tighter. We're tightening that belt. And everybody's gone, well, we're going to be punching a few more holes in that belt now because it needs to be tighter. And I know when I've gone shopping, you get to the till at the end and you go, crikey. What? I chose less. I purposely didn't go. I went for own brand and it's still, and you just go, crikey. Yeah, and I'm noticing that. And I suppose the theory is I'm a normal family, send the money to the son at university, and we've been having the conversation now going, is it enough for you? You're not at the pub, are you?
No, Mum.
No, Mum.
What's that jukebox? No. But say, what are you doing? Have you thought about slow cooker? Are you batch cooking? But being mindful of that. And there's some of our families that don't have that luxury either, which was why with that other hat on, within the Thetford Municipal and United Charities, we have 3 threads to it, and obviously we were delighted, well, not delighted, but pleased to be able to support the whole energy bank side of things, which, we'd had conversations in the past, hadn't we, when, people were presenting at the Foodbank and going, it's great you giving me a tin of beans, but we're eating them cold. So
Which is rank, by the way.
I don't like beans anyway, but cold beans. Or only one thing worse, cold spaghetti hoops.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But, in all seriousness, that ability to make that difference so that the family can cook and have a hot meal together. It's not just the food provision then, it's that family time as well, which is just so important. Because I always value the time sat at the dinner table. You download, don't you? What did you do today at school? What are the issues and everything else? If you take that away from families, you're removing a means of communication. I think we underestimate the impact that it has as well.
Yeah, I think
that's really good.
Personally, I think the social bits of the jigsaw are just as weighty as the economic parts. And it's then two things working in tandem, isn't it, that will get probably solutions. So like in principle then, like, because my understanding of universal credit is that it's less than the old legacy benefits. It's pitched to be like, it's to get you your essentials effectively. And so like, I suppose if inflation is going up and there's a lag phase with universal catching up every year, then there's always going to be that stage of there isn't enough.
There's a hungry gap, quite literally, isn't there?
Yeah, and so it's hard to must be very difficult to pitch that as a central government, what level that should be at. And so is a better solution, or, Truss would argue it should be increased to the level where, with this cost of living crisis, it's at that level where people can afford the essentials. But one thing that I think is a possible, another part of the jigsaw piece for solutions is the local welfare assistance schemes, the LWA schemes, which obviously I hadn't, if I'm honest, heard about them until I was looking at the Trussell vision and some of the solutions that could work. And I'm not sure how long Norfolk had run their local welfare assistance schemes, but I read just this morning actually that it was something like 1 in 7 local authorities weren't running any form of local provision at all prior to the pandemic, and I think that's changed now. I think the funding's changed that as well. But are you aware if local authorities are obliged to provide a local welfare assistance scheme now, or is it just the funding's been made available and they can draw on it if they want? Do you even know that?
I have to say I don't know.
Because I think in 2020 or 2021 it wasn't an obligation, and so some weren't. So I'm not sure if that's changed. And if that is the case, I think it's probably should be an obligation, perhaps, if the funding's available centrally. And
I think that's the challenge, because you quite often see central government make an announcement and they go, we're going to do this. And the rest of us in local authorities going, really? Oh, okay.
How are we going to do it?
Can we have that memo before you announce it
to the public?
And the how-to. I appreciate that things moved at pace at the start of the pandemic, but quite often, I've worked in some businesses like that the CEO comes in and goes, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're all like, heads up would be nice. And I think that's quite often a frustration with the public, that local authorities and those that are expected to deliver things find out at the same time as the big public announcement, and you just go, we don't know what we're getting. We don't know what the parameters are. We don't know what the deliverables are and everything else. So that becomes really quite difficult.
And I suppose if it's a new provision, it's like you're inventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Like in real time.
What's it look
when
like?
Someone said go.
Yeah, and you're like, we're on the race, but we don't know where we're quite going yet, or if we're supposed to be running or skipping.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly difficult. But I know all the authorities that I work with, where they can help, they will help, where there's the opportunity to. But, it sounds awful, but just like, household budgets are being squeezed, the local authorities' budgets are being squeezed.
And they're finite, aren't they? It's
Absolutely.
not like there's a never-ending pot.
No.
So to balance them decisions, if you're in them decision-making positions, it must be incredibly difficult.
And it is always public money. Always public money. And you're mindful of that greater level of responsibility that you have to all residents. And that's a real challenge.
Yeah. And I suppose, like from my point of view, having a local welfare assistance scheme up and running, so like it was announced in April that was going to be extended again, and so the funding, I think for England alone, was 842 million or something, and so Norfolk's share of that was 13.4, but Norfolk put in another 0.4 million, I think, of their own budget to make that 13.8 million. And so like Steph on Foodbank sessions may well refer into the Norfolk Assistance Scheme, which is funded through the Household Support Fund, but there's also a big bunch of funding as well. I think the majority of it, 7.2 million in Norfolk, is for cost of living support, so vouchers for every child in the household of £15 a child, and then doubles up in the summer and at Christmas, I think, as well.
And that's the other side of things, that within certain parameters, the local authority can choose how they deploy that. So you kind of have the framework and you go, well, actually, this reflects our residents' needs better, so let's focus it this way. So
do you think that is a better way of doing it? So there's decision making locally for the local needs, rather than a top-down approach of saying this is the way, the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, because actually, people like us on the ground, local representatives, people like yourselves, are more aware of the local residents' needs, and what works in Thetford is very, very different to what could potentially work, I don't know, in Birmingham. The parameters are different, the needs are different, the social economic situation's different. So we need to have that, I suppose, autonomy, which is really important to make those local spending decisions that benefit our residents.
I just wanted to take a minute, while I've got one, to ask you to please subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell. It only takes a second. Come on, you can do it. Do it. Thanks.
So if there was only a finite pot of extra money that government were going to put into welfare, would your opinion be you'd rather sort of funnel that into local welfare assistance schemes over just a generic universal credit uplift?
Yes.
You think that would be ideal for you?
That's my personal view. Yeah, because then it can respond to those residents' needs. And then you've got a bit of flexibility should circumstances change locally or something new come up. Yeah,
I suppose that the only downside of that is that some local authorities will do a better job than others at delivering it, or the access to it, or the communication about it, and all that sort of stuff.
And that's the downside, that then theoretically you have that a postcode lottery side of things. So it's a really difficult balance to have, and I think that's the challenge with all local authorities, is which choices do we make?
Well, I suppose the upsides probably outweigh the downsides, in that it can be incredibly quick as well compared to a central government response. In like immediate, I think they're trying to do it within 48 hours with the Norfolk Assistance Scheme. So, and for people who are watching at home, it could be for one-off items of, a fridge has gone or a boiler's gone or something, and it's and if we think about it, like, if there are local authorities that don't have this in place and someone's on universal credit and it is just for the essentials, that's fine until something one-off happens, isn't it? And so, like, to have a local welfare assistance scheme ready to go all the time, not just in times of crisis like in COVID or something, is probably a great balance, like two-pronged approach to welfare that could probably help, us, not help us, but help clients not come to us in them times. There's another port of call that they can go and get the help that they need to stop them needing us in the first place.
And I think we saw that, going back to the pandemic, that locally we could pivot and deliver really focused, really, change-making interventions for our residents when we were given just carte blanche. There's the money, deliver it as you need to. And I think potentially central government has recognised that those, local facilities, keep using that word, I feel like I'm in Royston Basie, but the people who are on the ground, who are dealing with the community, understand the community and can deliver for the community and support the community. And it is about those safety nets. because sometimes we all need someone to catch us.
Yeah, I agree. And it's become, we were having a conversation earlier, but how it can be easy when like something like Foodbank has become so massive that people become dependent on it rather than it being a net that they then sort of clamber out of or get helped out of as well. And so it's that balancing act, isn't it, of trying to get the provision right and the support right rather than just setting someone up to be dependent on support.
We're going to need to do both for a while, and going back to that analogy of the boat turning around at sea, we are going to need to have both for a period, and that is a really big challenge because you're doing that on the one hand, but then you're also doing that and you're not necessarily seeing the change instantly. But it will need both approaches, and then gradually, hopefully, that will lessen, and then the support is there to keep people going.
So do you think long term then local welfare assistance schemes should be commonplace then, or do you think it would just be during particularly tough economic times? Because I suppose from an individual's perspective, it's irrelevant what's happening in the wider economy.
Yeah. I think there should always be a safety net. We should always be able to support people in their time of need and challenge.
The more I've read about it, because like a year or so ago, I didn't even know about local welfare assistance at all. Like, I just thought it was all, centralised. And so I think it does make sense having that two-pronged approach, one that's sort of your regular stuff and then a local welfare assistance scheme that's for emergency response. A bit like the Foodbank was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was like, we're here for an emergency for these few days. While you're waiting for the local authority perhaps or someone else to step in, we're like the first port of call. Yeah. But it's become not just that anymore. So, which is probably why Trussell wants to try and turn things around and make it be initially what it used to be and then hopefully evaporate over time. But we started this podcast because we were tasked with reducing the number of food bank parcels going out for our individual food bank and the people that we impact locally. And the more we talked about it, the more we were like, we don't know how to do that. Yeah. Like, it's such a big problem. Yeah. That's why we want to talk to lots of people and get, like, what's your solution?
Yeah. I think the education side of things and that support is so important, but then you wouldn't expect anything less from me as a former school governor. But really mindful that, 15 years ago, we were having the conversation about bringing in, money, education, how to manage a bank account, how to even open a bank account, how to budget, understanding credit, all that side of things. We were talking about it back then, and some of the banks were keen to do it, but it never got anywhere. Yeah. And I think those sort of life skills really should be taught in schools because some of us are lucky enough to have parents that can do that with us. But if you haven't got that, resource at home, well, you go to school because that's where you learn things. In the same way, reading, writing, all of that. So I think if we can support people through education, and it doesn't have to be, sitting in a classroom being boringly spoken to with, PowerPoint after PowerPoint, but practical supportive advice, how to, set a budget, manage money. And I think it's becoming more and more important as, people rely on debit cards and cards these days. Yeah. Cash, I am best when I've got, I am the girl that used to take out X amount when she went to the pub, and when that was finished, Jane was going home.
And not until that point.
Not until that point. But I think because we use cash less, you don't have that tangible relationship with your money, and it's so easy to just, and now when there's the...
chip and pin. Oh, the contactless.
Yeah, £100, one go, bump.
Yeah. I read a interesting study about how paying for things like cash has the same responses in the brain as pain, because it's that tangible. Where when you pay with card, it doesn't. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So only cash then. It's the solution. Paid in cash. In ones.
No, but I think there's a lot to be said about that visual engagement, and like you say, it is painful to part with it sometimes, and also an awareness, because quite often I don't think there's a tangible relationship between how long it takes you to earn that money and how long it takes you to spend it. I mean, in my terms, a hardback book range from $14.99 to £25-30. So that could be a bit more than somebody's hourly rate, or 2 or 3 times somebody's hourly rate. Yeah. And when you put it in that context, you go, oh, and an appreciation for the value. And I think, again, because it's so easy with contactless, perhaps we've lost that connection. So I really do think that money management and life skills really need to be looked at within the schools. I mean, we do social and personal health. Actually, that financial health, and that links so closely into mental well-being, and supporting people that way, because those challenges that are experienced, my goodness, I can't pay the electricity bill.
They put pressures on all the other systems, don't they?
And actually that it's a really simple thing that we can do to support and help.
Yeah, well, we had exactly the same conversation with Carly, who works in supported housing, and with her clients, her residents, the same. She's actually witnessing it firsthand, saying this is, from her point of view, the most important thing to do to help them not need food banks in the future and getting into the school. So exactly the same sort of mentality.
I'm glad I'm not out there on my own.
But coming from a position brought up from a single mum, but who was amazing and taught us a lot of life skills and a lot of support, and were cheered on by her. And so, you can easily take for granted that other people have
Don't
that. And so wouldn't necessarily see that as a solution to some of these social problems. Cool. So anything else? Any other big pieces of the jigsaw that you think are major players in trying to turn this boat around?
I'm not sure. I think if I had all the answers, I wouldn't be just a county councillor. I think that's the challenge, and even for someone like myself who's within that decision-making process locally, it is so big. There is so much. And there will always be challenges, so I don't think we can eradicate the need for support. We just need to be able to get people into a better place.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of what I'm finding from most people I talk to about this problem or issue, is that most people don't ever see it ending, but would rather it be a lot less than it is now. And so, like it perhaps was 10 or 15 years ago, the level of support we were given, we can be comfortable with that as a society. And so, from my point of view, if we're trying to eradicate it as close as we can, anyone who's on board or trying to head in that direction is great. We'll try and make that happen. I think just talking to people and learning about it, if we're going to get a solution and move in that direction, I think it's a good thing from every agency, every council, every councillor, every teacher, every person who has any levers of power or decision making. I think it'd only be good to talk about it and try and strive for solutions. I'm sure we'll not agree most of the time.
But that's a good thing, because through those conversations you say, well, why don't you agree with that, and then find out, and then you find those middle grounds, and then quite often a new idea comes out of it, which actually really does work for a lot of people. So I suppose that's the really important thing about having the ability to speak freely about a topic and your views on it. Because I suppose a lot of these solutions, not all of them, because many of them are cultural or social, but many of them are political, and the policies that are made. And I suppose that's really difficult to do if there's parties that are trying to fight each other, and it's all about politics rather than the solutions that they're coming to. And I applaud anyone who can do that well, because it must be such a difficult game to play. And it is, but I think I'll speak for myself, I think most politicians, and it feels like a dirty word sometimes, but I am one because I'm in the political world. But I think most of us just are here to leave the world a little bit better and make a difference in our residents' lives. I think what differs is the how we get there. And it's about choices in the same way when you're walking around Aldi or Tesco's or Waitrose or Lidl, the choices that you make. You can either choose to do that and have less, or you can choose to do that and have more. And it's those balances and choices that I think tend to vary.
Yeah, and I think
terms of
that's the danger with what we're trying to head to, is if it becomes too politicised, is that no decisions get done or made that head in the right direction. Because I'm sure there'll be people who would like to lift universal credit up, double it, and others would want to actually half it and employ some local authority welfare scheme or something, or more training and, you know, more money pumped in a different direction. And so, hopefully over the years we can sort of batter left and right and wiggle away through the middle and with some sort of outcome.
And I think that's kind of it. You do wiggle through. That's a really interesting phrase, isn't it? I'm not sure that's going to...
It won't be on question time.
No, it won't be on question time. It's not going to be on any manifestos on any party, I don't think. But ultimately, it is that balancing act of this, but this. And again, going back to that point, there is no one silver bullet to resolve all issues, because sadly, you know, poverty and those challenges have been a lifelong, centuries-old issue that just kind of does that swingometer, doesn't it? That it gets worse, sometimes gets better, and then, you know, depending on external issues.
Okay, well, that's a good place to stop, I think. And so thank you for coming and chatting with us. Join us next Friday for our next episode of the Hublife Podcast. See you then. If you enjoyed this episode of the Hublife Podcast, then why not check out another one over here, or try something a little different over there.